Hi, this is Dr. Toby, your host on Health and Wellness with Dr. Toby. Thank you for joining us. We have a special guest, Dr. John McFadden. Dr. John McFadden trained at the Mississippi State University, and he had his undergrad medical school at the University of Mississippi Medical School. Went on to get his pediatric residency at the University of Texas MB Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas. Since he's finished residency, he's been working as a missionary. Landed on the shores of Nigeria at the Eku Baptist Hospital, where he served as a medical missionary for 10 years in 1971. He remained there till 1981 and then retired, came back to the U.S., worked for a bit, and has since then worked as a missionary in Haiti and in Monrovia, Liberia. This man has written a lot of papers, has toured the nations, has been a blessing to generations, and he's been married to his wife for 60 years, and they have 3 lovely kids. You don't want to miss his story. Join us. Jesus is Lord. Amen. Hi, this is Dr. Toby, your host on Health and Wellness. Thank you for joining us. Honored, privilege to have you on the show. Don't touch that dial. We have a great guest on the show, Dr. John McFadden. He's a pediatrician by training. He's a missionary by calling. He born in Monroe, Louisiana, and traveled all over the world to Monrovia, Nigeria, Haiti, as a medical missionary to the underserved. He trained at the University of Mississippi Medical Center after a bachelor's in bachelor's was at the Mississippi State University, and then he did his residency at the UT Galveston Medical Branch. He's been a past veteran, worked a bit in the military, and rose to the rank of a captain, and he's married to his wife now this year for 60 years. They have 3 lovely children and multiple grandchildren, and I can dare say probably great-grandchildren too, right? One great-grand. A great-grand, making you great. Praise God. What a blessing. Wow. So let's talk a bit about the missions, because there are many people watching who they love missions. I go on missions every year. We're going this year to Boko. Boko is in the middle. It's kind of near Jos. It's kind of in the middle of Nigeria. So you went to a place called Eku Sapele Hospital,
Correct.
Baptist Hospital in Eku.
Yes.
And I presume you flew into Lagos and then drove to Eku?
Yeah, yes, we did. We had an interesting trip in. Uh, in those days, they just had something like a big metal building that was the processing center for people arriving. And we had 3 little girls that were running around everywhere, and they were covered with dust after about 10 minutes. It was just an open building because you don't have to worry about air conditioning or whatever there.
Wow, I guess that was in the 1970s, yeah. So they picked you up, the missions board, the Baptist missions, they picked you up at the airport and drove you down to...
They did, but we went to a school, one of the Baptist schools in Lagos first, and spent 2 or 3 days there to sort of get oriented and start getting some food together and whatever that might not be available further into the interior.
Wow, wow, wow. And then tell us a bit about, you spent 10 years there. Did you come back regularly to the U.S. when you were in Nigeria?
We came every 3 years. Came home for a year every 3 years.
How did you handle malaria, typhoid, tropical diseases, schistosomiasis, worms? How did you, as you and your kids, did you take the prophylactic malaria medicine every day, or what did
Yes,
you do?
in those days we had a weekly medication we could take. I know we used chloroquine. We used chloroquine for treatment then because it wasn't resistant malaria. Then we had a preventive pill called Daraprim, which I don't think they're using anymore. Well, they certainly couldn't use it for uh, resistant malaria.
Right. Wow. So your kids were taking it and you were taking it.
Yes, but
Okay.
we still got malaria occasionally.
But not to the point of life-threatening.
Yes, we didn't get in any life-threatening problems with it. We were blessed.
Did you have a house, or did you, where did, I mean, because, my viewers are wondering, I mean, hey, this man is taking his wife and 3 kids to a village, literally a village, when you compare it to infrastructure in America. I mean, did you have a roof, an air conditioner, a fridge, a washing machine, a dishwasher? Did you have carpet? Did you have, what was your facilities in that
Well, we
hospital?
were blessed in that we had essentially an American-built hospital. We had a missionary architect who had built 6 or 7 houses on the hospital compound. The hospital had a 70-acre compound, and so they'd built houses for the missionaries and Nigerian staff on the compound. And we had electricity. We were fortunate to have 24-hour day electricity usually. We had deep well water and running water in the house. So we were way ahead of many
The
missions in
rest.
those days.
Okay, so that's awesome. Wow. And you had some people who worked as nannies or
Oh,
cleaners or.
yes, yes. We had help.
Mm,
I had an experience. We had a patient come to the hospital one time with his arm hanging off, just had a little piece of skin attaching his upper arm. And we attempted to reattach it, but we were unsuccessful. And so when it was about time to discharge, he had nowhere to go. He was sort of an orphan. And they asked me, said, John, said, could you make a gardener out of this guy? I said, well, I'll try. And we ended up with a one-armed gardener. He could cut grass and he could dig and whatever. And
okay.
he helped me raise rabbits.
Oh my goodness. What did you do with the rabbits?
We ate them mainly. Pretty good protein.
Okay.
Chicken was not easy to come by, and
Oh.
they did kill a beef in the town every market day, so we had beef. Now, this beef was a little bit different from here. It had been driven from the north. There was a sickness that the cattle got in the south,
Mm,
and so to get beef in our area, it had to be driven from the north, which may be 200 or 300 miles or more.
wow.
And it was a bit on the tough side usually, so you had to use some imagination on fixing beef dishes.
How about goats? I'm sure you tasted some goats.
Well, we had. I don't think my wife was too excited about eating goat meat. I love the goat soup, but we actually we had rabbits most of the time we were there,
Okay.
and used that meat mostly.
Really?
But
Wow.
we could buy some chicken and fish. We were only 30 miles from a fishing center,
Oh,
and
wow.
we could buy fish, so we had a fair amount of fish.
Interesting. Oh my goodness. So you said you felt you were called. I mean, a lot of my viewers are like, how do I know I'm called to the mission field? You said you felt, or was it just a impression? Was it just a knowing? Was it just a desire? Was it just an ambition? What made you know that? I mean, think about it. You could have sat in America and earned millions of dollars as a pediatrician
Well,
and retired comfortably, but you chose to go abroad that doesn't have as many prospective financial laurels. So for you to make that decision took a lot of courage.
in the church, we hear about missions all the time growing up, and there are some of us who feel that's what God wants us to do, and we start following that path. And sometimes people make it all the way, some don't. It just depends
So
on.
you just had that feeling that this is what God wanted me to do.
Yes, and my wife too.
Awesome. Wow, that's fantastic. And I mean, you never put that burden on anybody else. I mean, you didn't tell your brother you got to come to the mission field. You didn't. I mean, he was free to do what he wanted to do.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And he ended up working for a commercial company as an engineer,
Sure.
like a oil company or something.
Really, 2 oil-related companies.
Okay. Okay. And he never made fun of you for going to the mission field. I mean, you know what brothers can.
Yeah. No.
Like I have all
No.
this. Where are you going to Nigeria? What are you doing there? Did he ever support? Was he
Oh,
supportive?
he was supportive,
Oh
yes.
wow, wow, that's how it should be. Wow. So tell us some of your experiences in Nigeria. I mean, I'm sure 10 years is a long time. I mean, there were obviously the malarias, the diarrheas, the food poisoning. You know, you never got robbed, thankfully.
Well,
Or
that's another story.
okay,
We don't want to hear that here.
no, it's okay. I mean, everybody has bad sides of their country. America has its own sides too. You know, I mean, but you were not victimized. You weren't. You weren't. Nobody came across as vindictive or like a. They didn't make you look like a villain for coming to a foreign country.
No, not really. We had our share of thieves around. Some in the hospital, some out of the hospital, some in the village, and some out of the village. So just about like here. Uh, you couldn't find much difference in that. But the medical work in the hospital was ongoing all the time. We had call every third or fourth night.
Wow.
Sometimes we'd stay up all night operating. It was sort of a surgically oriented hospital. So we would have people with obstructed bowel, with needing C-sections, needing stab wounds even. Um, all sorts of injuries, fractures and such would come in after hours.
Orthopedics too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So there was no limit to what you could do. I mean, you were like the generalist. I mean, you did orthopedics, urology, GYN. Am I
Well,
correct?
yeah, yes. For instance, I did just after a couple of years I did all the children's orthopedics, but the adult you would have some things that would have to have a specialist. For instance, open surgical orthopedic surgical procedures. I could do a couple, but not very many.
Oh wow, wow, that's fantastic. I'm sure your classmates in Mississippi were envious that wow, your life. I mean, they wanted. I mean, not too many doctors get to do a lot of these different surgeries.
Definitely,
You know.
definitely.
So, so
Well,
that's
another big portion of our time was spent in teaching because
ah,
we had interns the whole time I was there, and right toward the end we started getting in some family practice residents. And then I've been back several times and have helped with the teaching program when I've been
wow.
back.
But did you notice any? I call it reverse racism. You see, in America, they they say there's some racism, black versus white. In Nigeria, I'm sure you noticed that people respected the white man. There wasn't a negative attitude, or was there a negative attitude? What do you
Well,
think?
there's negative attitudes everywhere. Uh, they can talk all they want, but you get people who uh, just develop these ideas about this, that, and the other, and sometimes from their experience, sometimes something they read in a book or whatever. Uh, One of the most amusing tales, and this you brought it up. Uh, I've laughed about this. Our our senior pastor in the area, who was a Baptist, we went to his church, had a daughter who came to the States. And that man was he just couldn't quite grasp it that his daughter came to the States and married a white man.
Really?
He, it bothered him. Now, I never did try to talk to him much about it, but he mentioned it to me several
Oh,
times.
really?
And that was just his quirk.
Right.
I didn't hold against him anything, but it we have all this race
Right.
stuff here. We got a big problem going on over in Jackson, Mississippi right now that they want to put racial tones on, and not everybody agrees with that. And so the other side of it, we had a big oil industry. We were on the edge of the oil fields
Right.
and did medical care for many of the foreign workers in the oil fields and the Nigerians.
Right.
And so some of them would develop their own bunch of ideas about race relations and such. Uh,
Did you witness any interracial marriages while you were there in ACU? Like so one of the doctors married a nurse from Nigeria or something?
no,
No.
we didn't have enough there. We had one pastor married one of the nurses at ECU, but they were both American.
Oh,
We
okay.
didn't have
Okay.
much, but there were a number of Nigerians who were married to whites from other countries, mostly England.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we had some friends who were interracial.
Wow, that's awesome. Praise God. That's heaven. You know, heaven is going to be all every nation, every
Amen.
tribe, every tongue, every creed. You know, so we're going to have Baptist, Methodist, Episcopalian, Pentecostal. Heaven is going to be quite a a mixed bunch. You know, so people need to get used to it because this is what we're going to see when we get to heaven.
Well,
You know?
one thing we could do at the hospital, we had 2 or 3 chaplains, and then most of the people working on the wards and nurses, ward aides and whatever were serious Christians also, and the long-term patients like burns and some of the other tuberculosis, we had a longer term to witness to them. Now, one story about burns, we had a guy come in one time burned from his waist up, and we found out that he'd been working on an oil rig, and he'd been out smoking in an area where they vented gas. And so his buddy was with him, and his buddy wasn't burned. We said, "Now, sir, how was it you got burned and your buddy did get burned?" He says, "My buddy ducked." he somehow he knew it was coming, and he ducked, and the other one didn't. So he didn't get burned really, really bad. We were able to patch him up, but we did have some very serious burns.
Wow, unbelievable. And I mean, I'm sure you lost some, patients, and
Oh,
there were
yes.
people who your heart, went out to. You lost children, you lost adults. Did you see meningitis?
We saw lots of meningitis. We saw tetanus. We saw just about every infection you can think of that occurs in the tropics.
They don't see them in America, yeah. I saw that because I train in Nigeria, so meningitis, tetanus are, things we see regularly. Then you see the exotic things, like myasthenia gravis and, the Dutchess muscular dystrophy.
Well, it's interesting that some of these things you see, some you don't see, and we wonder whether it's diet or genes or whatever. One interesting thing, in the 10 years, I never saw a Nigerian with a gallbladder. Never saw a gallbladder case the whole time. Now, you may have seen some, but in those days, we didn't have gallbladder. Let's see, there's some other, for instance, we have trouble here with eating disorders. And never saw anybody with an eating disorder there.
Okay.
Some of these things you just don't see. And premature babies. You go to a hospital here, you got a whole ward full of premature babies. Rarely saw one there.
Rarely saw one there. You're right.
So
it's
amazing.
interesting. Yeah, so you're right, because all through my medical school, I never saw gallbladder.
Yeah.
It was when I came to America that I heard about cholecystitis, cholelithiasis, but maybe they had it and they just didn't, they treated everything like appendicitis,
Well, at our hospital, it was pretty easy to diagnose these type things because the American-trained doctors had grown up with it. They'd been in, and they were looking for such cases. And actually, we didn't have many cases of appendicitis. It seems to be a bit more common here. It wasn't very common there.
Now, I'm sure you didn't have things like CAT scans, MRIs.
No.
So
We were
how
lucky
did
to have X-ray.
How did you make your diagnosis, like brain bleeds or strokes or, things that we take for granted now?
Well, we would have to go on physical findings. Most of this, a real very sick person, you can get a pretty good idea of what's going on without all the tests. And sometimes all the tests show up as proves you can't do anything for it.
Mm-hmm.
But much of the time, you can figure out something to do.
How about, was HIV there when you were there?
It was not, thank
Okay.
goodness. Started coming not too long after we
After
left.
you left. Hepatitis wasn't really on the map
We
then.
saw an occasional case of hepatitis. We had it was particularly rough on pregnant women. We had several die with it.
Wow.
Now they would come in severely jaundiced. Exactly
Right.
what
With that A, B, and C, we didn't know.
yes,
Right.
what was going on, we never were sure. But
You developed some interest in fibromyalgia, I noticed. Was
Well,
that from the mission field or?
that's a long story too.
Okay.
I had gone back to Nigeria in 1976, and we shipped a couple of crates, and in one of the crates was a large freezer. And so it was sitting in my yard, and we were traveling to take the children to school the next day in Jos. So I had some little guys helping me get it in the house. We were trying to take it through the door, and they left me holding it, the heavy end. I ruptured a disc in my back, put me bedridden. Now, we didn't know what it was then I'd injured. We just knew I had a severe back injury. X-rays showed nothing. About sometime 2 to 3 weeks later, I developed such severe neck pain that I fainted in the bathroom one night. And through the retrospectroscope, it was fibromyalgia. I was bedridden with that there for months. I had an American medical student who had come at that time, and he essentially did the pediatric ward. He would come to my window and ask me questions and go back to the hospital and take care of whatever. So that went on for months and
Was
months.
he from UMC or University of Mississippi? No.
No,
Oh,
Texas somewhere.
Wow.
I know his name, but I don't know
That must have been great
where he's
experience
from.
for
Well,
him.
it was a life-changing experience.
Life-changing.
He was there for 2 months. And I finally got where I could go to the hospital, and my worst pain in my back was on the right side, and I could walk on crutches and not have so much pain that I could stay up maybe 30 minutes at a time to go and work a while at the hospital. We never did find out exactly what was going on until I had a discogram done many years later, like probably 20 years later, still in pain. And I had one procedure done on one disc. My neck pain, it actually still with me. I found out later I had 2 ruptured discs in my neck on the left side that were herniated when MRI came out. And recently the next one down's gone bad. It put me in a hospital not too long ago. So I've had a long experience with pain, and I gravitated into pain medicine, and that's where I got interested in looking into the fibromyalgia syndrome and have done research on that for a number of years.
Wow, wow. And I heard they just named the place after you at the Baptist Hospital at Coop. They call it McFadden Landing.
Oh, my goodness.
I heard that from your daughter.
We had a clear river that ran nearby called the Ethiop River, a very appropriate name for Africa. It was spring-fed. It started probably about 20 to 25 miles north of us. And they'd always wanted a way to get to the river. You had to travel upstream or downstream to even get to the river. There was no way. The hospital was only a half mile, but it was swamp and jungle all the way. And I ended up engineering a little path down to the river. That's how I think when I would come, they'd put a sign that said McFadden Landing. When the administrator would come, they would put his name on it.
Oh, really? I mean, what were they going to do at the river? To fish or?
Mainly for swimming and some fishing. And then the local people mined sand. The river had a beautiful white sand on the bottom, just about all the way up and down.
Oh, wow.
And you could put a heavy cable across the river and take a big canoe and attach it, each end to the cable, put a ladder down to the bottom, say 15, 17 feet or so, and go down and take a bucket of sand, bring it up, dump it in the canoe, then take your canoe upstream, downstream, or wherever to unload it for building
Wow.
good building
Good
sand.
building
Beautiful.
sand. My goodness. So you came back to the U.S. in 1981.
Correct.
You had logged 700 cesarean sections. Is that what I heard?
That's where we ended up.
Wow.
I did a couple one time when I went back, but uh,
How many? Did you do any twin deliveries with the cesarean section? Or like, they didn't have many triplets or twins?
not many.
Okay.
We rarely had triplets or twins there.
Okay.
I don't remember a single case of triplets and not very many twins. It was
Okay,
interesting.
yeah. Mostly in the western part of Nigeria. That's where they have
Uh-huh.
the multiple gestations. They think it's the food they eat. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And you fell in love with some of the food. My wife was talking to you about okra, egusi. I don't know which one they serve
Yes, I could eat anything the
Onubu.
Nigerians could eat.
Okay, okay.
I guess I grew up on the farm and I ate most whatever came along.
Including
called
the
it-
goat.
We called it bushmeat there.
Oh, you
We
ate the
had it.
bushmeat.
Bushmeat, oh yeah.
Yeah, the bushmeat is some animal that runs across the road and they crush it and then they take it home and
And they frequently will sort of about halfway cook it to transport it, but some of the odors rather strong after it's
Oh,
been there
yeah.
2 or 3 days.
they think that's part of what caused the Ebola outbreak.
It is the
That-
bats in northern Liberia. What happens in Liberia, the bush animals are mostly in the northern part of the country, and they have to be transported 100 miles or so to the south. And the only way to transport them is on public transport. So they would just sort of scorch the carcass of whatever, and the transport people would touch it and cooking and selling it and whatever, and
Wow.
that really helped spread it around.
Spread it around. We're going to be back with Dr. John McFadden. He's been sharing his tales in Nigeria as a missionary for 10 years. But after that, he went back a couple of times, and he even traveled to Haiti and Liberia. He's going to continue sharing his story of being God's hands and feet to the most hurting. You don't want to miss this story. Thank you. Stay in tune. Check us out next week. Don't forget, check us out at faithandpower.online. Jesus is Lord. God bless you.